Good afternoon, everyone. This is Tim Sarrantonio, Director of Strategic Partnerships at Neon One. I am excited for today's presentation. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So you all should be seeing a very fancy 8 segments you need in your CRM for end of year success. We had a lot of people sign up for today, so I'm going to give it about a minute, but this is pretty action-packed, okay? We actually have designed a segment for today's presentation that does a really deep dive. Instead of me kind of flailing around live, I wanted to actually give you the best possible walkthrough on how to do this practically speaking. So when we shift into that, it's going to be kind of walking through something, but I'm going to be here live to engage any questions, clarifications, things of that nature. But I have some really, really awesome content that I want to just share live with you. And so we're going to wait about probably another minute or two to do that formally. So what I'll do is shift into the agenda, and you know what? I'm going to go ahead and start recording. Just stopped it. Okay, there we go. So this is 8 segments you need in your CRM for end of year success, folks. I am so excited for this. I have really nerded out for you today. So my geekiness is your benefit, and that's going to be pretty important for you later on. You'll see why. So we're going to get into the agenda formally in probably about a minute here. I'll just kind of pause on this as people come into the room. Some basic housekeeping items that we can go into. I'll go over those, but this is being recorded formally right now. Just made sure of that. I'm going to kind of introduce myself if you're not familiar with who I am, give a little context on why I am pretty excited for doing today's presentation for you. And then we're going to go over the basics around segmentation, communications, and automation, kind of put them into 3 different groupings for you. And then realistically diving into the proper segmentation of it in your CRM. We're going to be using the Neon CRM system as our live guinea pig for this, but there's a lot of stuff that you can apply to different databases. I'm going to get into that under my introductions, but I tried to kind of approach this that anybody can use these tools. We're just happen to use the tool that we have for that. And there is a further resources section. So if you check the handouts page, there is something for you there. So it's downloadable of the slides, of course, but I'd also encourage you to check that out a little bit later on. Would love to also hear where everybody's talking to me from or engaging me from. I'm here in upstate New York, Niskayuna, New York, personally, by the way. So we're going to go ahead and get formally started. Chicago, Rochester, Michigan, Wilton, awesome. Used to live in Chicago, 10 years. Arkansas, San Diego, Tacoma, Evanston, St. Louis, Boston. So if you can't tell, I have another monitor. So if you see me looking over there, that is what I am checking out. Judy, I know you from upstate New York. Plantsville, Connecticut. Hello. Oh, hi, Mary. Oh, Mary, you're going to love this. You're going to love this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of kick into our presentation today. I'm getting a little bit of a notification that the webcam is giving me some problems. So I'm actually going to turn off my face here to ensure that we have optimal network connection. So I'm going to be paying attention to the chat for the entire time, even when we shift into the presentation mode that I've pre-recorded for you earlier today. That was just to make sure that we have the best experience while walking through some very sophisticated concepts for you. So welcome for everyone. We got a wide representation from around the US, Canada, and more. So thank you for coming today. It's going to be a fun time today. So basic housekeeping, this is being recorded right now, and that will also in turn record the special presentation that we've put together for you. And this is going to go on our YouTube channel by tomorrow, and all of it will be emailed out to you, so you can download the handout, but definitely check out the other items. And Carol, thank you. It's great to hear from you, by the way, too. We are going to be taking questions. This is all me. So usually we try to bring in a partner, but I kind of wanted to, I shoved them out for this time because I was so excited about the content. So that's what we're doing here. So I'm going to be monitoring your questions throughout the entire time, even as we shift into the pre-recorded content. I'll be here live for you. And we are going to be nerding out here today. There are some very sophisticated concepts that we're going to be talking about. So, you know, I'm going to try to point you to resources. I also try to do a fair amount of walkthrough in terms of what we're showing, but, you know, our team is here. So if you're exploring CRM to see if this is a good fit for you, your account executive's there to kind of get into the details to make sure this is a good fit. And then also we're going to be getting into the kind of the practical things that we can do with your CRM. But yeah, so what we're going to be doing is diving into some detailed segmentation. There's elements of KPIs and things that might relate here. Somebody brought that up because they're using another system. I think this is something that you can get out of anything, no matter what. Today's presentation is not necessarily on KPIs, it's on detailed reporting segmentations, but this is just the beginning when we get into planning, so let's go ahead and dive in. My name's Tim Sarrantonio, Director of Strategic Partnerships. I've been with Neon One since 2011. By the way, we do have a team member here. If you are having questions about audio or basic things like that, they're here to help. I've helped raise over $3 million for various nonprofits. I started 2 nonprofits myself. I was named Nonprofit Pros Technology Professional of the Year. But most importantly for you, everything that I'm about to show you, I've done. I've actually done and walked through in practice. That's primarily how I actually helped raise that $3 million is through segmentation. I think that this is really, really cool stuff that anybody can get a lot out of. So I'm pretty excited for today. So I like to start with a quote. This is Chris Denny, who has written a book, Attention to Detail. And so obviously he leaned into that a little bit, but attention to detail is not about perfection. It's about excellence, about constant improvement. And so, you know, pretty excited to kind of dive into that with you today, because I think that this is what this is going to do, is to help iterate on a lot of these different things. And this is important. This is important because we are gearing up. Turns out that October, this is from our 10 stats for end of the year giving. Go to neon1.com's resources section to get 9 more like these. I'm going to actually give you another one. So besides the fact that November and December are the most popular months for making end of the year asks, some organizations are starting as early as September, but most organizations are beginning their planning in October. So this is perfect time. This is perfect time. Chris Denny is an author of the book Attention to Detail, by the way, just to kind of give that context. And so context for why we think that this is important is that a lot of organizations are starting their planning now, and then they need to get things out in the next 2 months after that, primarily. So what this is going to do is drill down into the segmentations that we think are going to be a good baseline for you. So first, I'm going to launch a little poll. I want to know, how many segments does your organization typically deploy in your appeals process? A little bit of further segmentation here is for end of the year. How about for end of the year if you want to focus in on that? Okay. Got most people voted. I'm going to let this lag on for another 5 seconds or so. Okay, very cool. So the average organization, if you want to know the results, is 62% of you said between 1 and 3. 14% of you said none. 21% are between 4 and 6, and then a very small handful are doing up to 8. So we are recommending 8 different segmentations that you can employ, but there's a lot of different things that we can get into to help streamline that process for you. So that's what we're going to get into. First of all, why should you segment? The biggest reason is personalization. As lovely Neon One consultant Mary Kalan would say, that Personalization is one of the biggest things that can make a donor feel loved. And the reality is that most of your donors are not actually doing a lot of research on you. What they're doing is that they're going on a few key elements of, did somebody, recommend you because they had a good experience of getting cool content from you, or you had a really fun virtual event, or they previously supported you and you made them feel good. They're not doing a lot of detailed research. They might look you up on Candid or something like that, but the reality is that you're the one making the best impression, not some outside engagement, not some outside entity. It's you. And so by personalizing your content, individuals are 50% more likely to engage. And most organizations are utilizing 1 to 3 touch points at their end of the year outreach. Look at that. Look at that. You validated that at that point live, folks. Remember, 62% of you said that exact thing. Now we're going to get into what segments are. Somebody asked, what is a segment? But basically, this is things that you're going to need to get your querying skills, your mail merging skills ready, your copywriting skills, and your database setting skills. Okay? And I will say that this is going to get advanced pretty quickly. This is going to be a pretty deep dive, and I'm pretty excited about that, but this is also why we're recording it. So basically, what a segment is the opposite of what a seglump is. So there's another database provider out there. We give the love where it's needed, and it's Bloomerang actually defined a term called seglumping, Stephen Shattuck over there. And I love that term because it's basically like if you send out an email to everybody and you say, thank you for your donation / volunteering / virtual event ticket / membership. Thanks for your support. And you just kind of dump everybody together. That is the opposite of a segment. That is the opposite of segment. A segment is a detailed focus on basically a type of donor or person in your database. A segment is a way to identify and help streamline the ways that you talk to people. That is a segment. So when you're doing segmentation, you are saying, I am going to create an audience, and then I'm going to create a special message for that audience, because if I do that, I have a higher likelihood of them coming back and giving to me, because it looks, because you did, make it personal to them. So that is why segmentation is so important, and seglumping is something you should try to avoid. Now, what are the 8 segments in detail? First segment, first-time donors, people who gave to you in 2020. That is the first segment that you should be thinking about. Now, once we get into the product dive, I'm going to show you explicitly every single one of these segments and how to query in them in your Neon CRM system. Apply these. If you don't happen to be using us, apply the same idea in your own database. First-time donors, very important segment. 2020 repeat donors. Repeat donors. These are people that have given to you this year already. Yes, we are saying appeal to them again in the end of the year. Do it. It is something that the data is very clear. We've been talking with Giving Tuesday. We've been doing internal analysis. We've been doing analysis with our friends at Donor Perfect and Bloomerang at the Fundraising Effectiveness Project. This is the best time to ask people. Do not stop. So yes, 2020 repeat donors. Come back to them. 2020 non-donors. Sometimes you hear this defined as LIBUNTs or SIBUNTs. Last year, but unfortunately not this year. Some year, but unfortunately not this year. It is my favorite acronym in all of the fundraising world. But these are people who haven't given to you in 2020, but they should have already. So that's a good one. Monthly donors. Really, really awesome one. These are people who are giving to you already. Monthly donor retention rate is in the 80s to 90s. So if you get somebody enrolled into a monthly donation program, there's a very high likelihood that they're going to stay with you. And if they stay with you for a while, they are 6 to 7 times more likely, according to Erica Wasdorf, as well as some analysis out of Britain, to become legacy givers. Monthly donors can many times turn into legacy givers. I actually just wrote about this for Mary Kalan, Hands-on Fundraising. Check it out. Prospective donors, these are people who you've been cultivating, your board members have been working with, but they haven't crossed the line yet in 2020. So these are people that you should be thinking about. Major donors, a lot of definitions in terms of what this is going to be. We're going to talk about that during the product side in terms of the practical application of this. But the reality is that major donors are a major segment you should be focusing on, actually one of the top ones. A lot of times they can really help close the gap in terms of your revenue goals. So special attention should be paid to them. Often overlooked in segments are volunteers, people who have given you their time, but not necessarily their treasure yet. So volunteers. And then feedback givers, which is kind of a catch-all for if they did a donor survey, if they emailed into you and complained, if they commented on your Facebook or Twitter feed, something like that, some sort of engagement and affinity that may or may not actually align with somebody who's given you a transaction, but they might be really interested in your mission. So feedback givers, another important segment. But I have actually broken out 2 bonus ones that might not apply to everybody, but just wanted to kind of pause on these ones because they're very interesting, especially in terms of the trends that we are seeing for 2020 into 2021, who you might be thinking about. So first is peer-to-peer fundraisers. We're seeing an explosion of peer-to-peer fundraising. In fact, our giving days actually saw over 112% increase in revenue because of peer-to-peer fundraising. When we did internal analysis of some of the top fundraising programs in the world, so folks like cystic fibrosis, Michael J. Fox, things of that nature, what we found is that while there are less individuals stepping up and fundraising for events, when they're doing things virtually, for instance, they're more passionate. They're doing more events and they're raising more money. So they deserve special attention, and many times you can actually turn a monthly donor into a peer-to-peer fundraiser. And then especially going back, if you had to cancel your gala, in the March, April, May, June, etc. period, many platforms rolled out features, or there was some manual work that I know other people had to do, where it was like, I want to turn my event ticket into a donation. These are people that you need to go back and give a little extra TLC. So we're going to dive into that. If you are looking how to plan this, especially on a tight turnaround, download the PDF of today's presentation, click this, or you might have gotten an email about this from us recently. We have a Prepare for Success in 3 weeks campaign guide for you. So get your copy. This is absolutely free. We designed it for you. Now, let's apply segments to appeals. So, all right, first and foremost, communication is key. Jenny, we're going to talk about that in a little bit in terms of the platforms for P2P. We have that in the Neon One ecosystem. And would you add program participants as a possible segment? I think that's one that we could definitely think about. And if you're wondering how to download the guide, our team's going to be able to hook you up on that. So let's think about communication. So this is really important because a study by Indiana University found that 84% of donors stopped giving because of reasons that could be tied back to poor communication. And yes, them dying is included in that. So people who passed away, that's poor communication about a legacy giving program. That's what they found. And so that's the vast majority of people stop giving is because of poor communication. And a big reason that is happening is because you are not segmenting your donors. So we're going to get into how to segment those folks in a practical way, but other things that you should think about when you're crafting your messaging, because each of those different segments has a different message to them, right? I'm not going to be talking to major donors the same way I'm talking to volunteers. And in some ways, by the way, Kathy, that program participants and volunteers can potentially be treated very similarly too, because there's a program affinity there. It's just in some ways, not all program participants, not all missions lend itself towards solicitation. by the way. So that's why it's not an immediate one that we can think of. But if it makes sense for you, then do the segment. That's what I'd like to say. Now, transactional slicing and dicing could be total gifts to the organization. Yes, maybe they only gave $50 this year, but historically they've actually given $50,000. Think about that. When was their last gift? What was their average gift overall? What's the average gift at your organization? So that getting into KPIs, this is where actually KPIs really help in guiding your strategy. So use the KPI dashboards and other tools at your disposal to actually drill in and create a transactional appeal strategy. But then, furthermore, I know, Jenny, giving you some KPI love, that's where it comes in, is it helps define your copy. It helps define your ask. And you should also be slicing and dicing in terms of your demographics too. How did they actually find you? How did they find you? What are their interests? What's their affinity? How close are they to you? How many touch points have you had with them? And what's your overall engagement? So Alexandra is asking in terms of, where can you start with segmentation? So we started with 8. But one of the things that there's another slide actually, Alexandra, that I think is going to explicitly answer your question, which is a prioritization scale. So I'll talk about your question in a moment, but I also want to call out in terms of what and how you should be thinking about, because I'm not really getting into the mechanics of designing your appeal today, right? Like I'm doing a very, very like data-driven engagement plan of like, hey, this is what you should think about when setting up your segmentations and setting up the tech strategy on that. But I'm not getting into the heart as much as I'd like to. And maybe we design another one around this that kind of takes it a next step. But if you need that, I highly suggest you get John Hayden's Donor Care. John Hayden passed away, unfortunately. He was a pillar in the fundraising community. And what we're going to do is we're going to cherry pick one of you who are attending today. We got over 200 of you. We're going to cherry pick one of you, and we're going to give you a book from John Hayden. I'm going to personally send you Donor Care by John Hayden. Okay, so that's something that we want to give back to you. We want to give back to you, and John's book in terms of designing this is going to really help you in terms of that. So especially if you haven't read the book, you're going to love this. If you have, and I happen to send it to you, give it to a friend. Give it to a friend. Now, Alexandra asked a really lovely question in terms of what should you prioritize, especially if you're new. Major donors and monthly donors are the top 2 segments. If you have to choose 2, focus in on them, because these are kind of in some ways opposite ends of the spectrum of importance of just growth. Because major donors are people who are very invested and have the capacity to give large gifts to make an immediate difference. Monthly donors, recurring donors, are people that might be giving small gifts, but they're reliable, and you can really, really rely on them. And then from down there, you can kind of drill into the 8 segments. So previous donors, these are the people that, maybe fall in the middle. So mid-sized donors that already gave this year, or Libunts, definitely focus in on them if you can, in terms of personalization, especially if you kind of get down here and you're like, I just can't do it. I do not have the capacity for this. Personalize these and then feel a little okay in terms of seglumping the rest of them. But I think that we're talking in October. We have time. We have time to get this going. Now, one of my favorite consultants, also Nancy Preston, says, I suggest looking at consistency of donations, 3 out of 5 years, 5 out of 7 years. Nancy, always love hearing from you. And yes, that's another one. And that actually tends to lean us toward major and monthly donors, I'd make an argument. So this is a little graphic that we created to help kind of visualize that, Alexandra. So using automation and appeals, this is going to be kind of 2 quick items before we shift into the deep dive that I pre-recorded for you earlier today, but I'll be actively answering questions throughout. First is engagement. You can automate engagement to a certain degree, especially if you plan out your workflow. And it's not necessarily that you're using computers to do everything. It's thinking about the steps of the journey. That's really what I think I want to encourage you to do, is to think about, like, how are people experiencing your organization, your mission? What is the red carpet for all the way to the awards ceremony, so to speak? Like, how do they see you? And so if most organizations are only getting 1 to 3 times that they're actually engaging them for especially end of the year outreach, well, what is that like? And how can you plan out that workflow for them? And then also, it doesn't stop at the gift, folks. It definitely does not stop at the gift. This is a cycle. So think about how even personalization can extend out to the I do not know what the bridge is. I used Unsplash to grab that. I just put like waterfall, by the way, Hillary, but I can look that up for you. Go to Unsplash for really free, beautiful free photos. So stewardship is another one where auto-responding receipts are not enough, and I'm actually going to touch on in a little bit how you can even get personalization automated within your receipting. That, yes, is the Eiffel Tower and some pigeons. Okay, so how do you do this in your CRM? So what I'm going to do is shift into a lovely walkthrough that I did and kind of gussied up for you. It's going to be about 35 minutes, 40 minutes, but I'm going to be following along, and then I'll be here at the very end for more live engagement for a few questions. But I'll be answering questions throughout. Oh, okay, everyone check the chat because some people actually identified it. It's outside Portland, Oregon, and that is beautiful. It is beautiful. And so what we're going to do is walk through some really great content that I did for you earlier, and I think you're going to love it. I think you're really going to love it.
While high-level understanding of segmentation and its application are important, the reality is you still need to actually do the work. So what we're going to do is unpack how that can actually be done within a CRM. We're going to use Neon CRM, obviously, for our examples here. So the 3 sections that we're going to unpack are, first, actually querying your database to build segmentations, where we're primarily going to focus on direct mail for this case. Then we're going to shift into how does this apply into creating actual appeals and actually managing the appeals process within the CRM. And then finally, some advanced suggestions when it comes to workflow automation, stewardship, and beyond. Where we're first going to start is actually the dashboards area, and there is a reports-specific dashboard where your saved reports all total up. So what I've done is named everything where it's easy to find and be specific to what you want to do. Now, some interesting items in regards to the Save Reports widget itself is, first, you can actually filter by the types of reports that you're going to be utilizing. So if you do not actually want to see reports that are very donations focused, transaction focused, and you kind of want to zero in on a working widget that is just designed for your appeals process, this is actually a pretty good way to go about that. I've also filtered it just for reports that I can see, and I've made it where it's pretty sizable to look at these, and then I like sorting on the report name itself. So in this case, what we're going to do is start with the basics of building segmentations itself, and that is the report and querying capabilities. When you're actually building reports and queries within a CRM, typically you're going to be choosing a general thing that you expect to come out of a report. That's the output. In the case of Neon CRM, that's choosing what type of report it is. So, for instance, we're going to be focusing on a mailing report. I'm going to talk about the differences between mailing reports, all accounts reports, household reports, and email audience reports right from here. But generally, this is where you should be focusing in terms of everything that you should be leveraging for building segmentation. While you can get to things through other types of reports, such as donation reports, donation detail reports in particular being pretty powerful, communications and mailing are pretty much built for exactly what we're trying to do here. The other caveat is the email audience report is definitely something that you should be using, but typically is most efficiently built in the email audiences area over here in the CRM. We're going to get into this a little bit later. The other thing is, what's the difference between a mailing report, an all accounts report, and a household report? Let's talk about the household report first. Not everyone manages households in their CRM the same way. This is pretty much regardless of what CRM that you're using. But the way that Neon actually manages its accounts are that there's accounts and households. Accounts can be individuals or companies. So they pretty much can collect a lot of different information, but the relationship is different. Households are not actually a separate type of account. It's a grouping. So it's really only making sure that individuals are grouped together into a household. Again, not everyone actually utilizes the system like this. For instance, your households might actually just have two individuals that are grouped together in one record. So Mr. and Mrs., etc. So really, it kind of depends on if you're leveraging the household feature when it comes to the household report. The primary way the household report works is that you can display just household records. So these are all the people that are grouped together, and hence you are not creating a second or third, etc. line item in your mailing poll that you're doing. But also, you can group all of those together, and you can also filter things out if you uncheck this. Now, it should be noted that there are a few slight limitations when it comes to the household report in terms of the fields that it queries compared to other types of reports that we're going to go into. More often than not, people are actually just leveraging a mailing report and perfectly fine with that. They can also, in an output, have the household salutation available and then filter by that, look at the people who are duplicates and merge those out. So there's a few different things that you can do for that. The basics of building a query are that you choose the report, you have the expected output columns that you are going to push out and utilize for something like a mail merge, and then you add and edit your criteria. The mailing report in particular is going to be useful because this is going to opt out people that do not want to be contacted by you or have passed away. It should be noted that once you are getting these types of things ready, you might actually, for a mail segmentation, want to remove the email opt-out itself. That's just something to keep in mind because they might want to be contacted by you, just maybe not by email. So keep that in mind. We're just going to keep it on by default here as we're building these out. When you're adding criteria, that is going to be the primary thing that we're going to be unpacking today for searching. So very quick overview in terms of how quote-unquote Boolean searching works. That's what it's called for when it says select an operator. What this means is that you're going to be typing in the field that you want to target. So let's do something like first donation date. And then you select an operator. So you want it to either equal a very specific date, not equal that date, have the first donation date be blank, which means that they have not basically given a donation. That's one easy way that you can actually filter on that. Not blank means that they've given some sort of gift in this. And then where we're going to get into it being very interesting is less than and equal to. Things like in range, especially with first donation dates, it could work. I think there's a little bit more nuanced ways that you can go about that. So then, as you add criteria, the assumption is that this is all needing to fit everything that's in this group. So if I add a random thing such as this needs to be equal a individual, that means that I am not going to see any company records if I run this. Whereas if I took this out, I might actually see a company record. So that's a very important understanding of groupings. The other one is add search group. So this gets interesting if you want to do something like an either or. So everybody in this group or this group that fits. So maybe you want to include people that donated to the annual fund, and then you also want to have people who donated to your COVID relief fund. And those are the two primary folks that you are going to focus in on your messaging. Great. Ad search group will do that. There's also other ways that you can get around that in terms of within a group, such as just choosing campaigns. That's another possibility there. But ad search groups just happens to give you a little bit more flexibility if you happen to not be able to get everybody into one group here. Exclude from results is exactly what it sounds like, and this could be a little tricky, and we're going to get into this in terms of what this means, because while you're excluding it, you're trying to create a positive definition in here. So it's not opposite land. You do need to put something that you expect to come up, and then the exclusion means that you expect it to not actually appear in your results. So there's a little bit of definition here to help with that. And then search within results is kind of like drilling down. It's like, great, I know that everybody who's given on the 14th of October has given, but then I want to, in turn, filter it down and see specific people. So it's a little bit opposite of the exclusion there. Let's actually get into the segmentations themselves and go ahead and start with the first one that we talked about, which is first-time donors. So in the following sections, we're going to talk about very basic starting criteria for building these types of segments in the CRM itself. A few caveats again here. First, you can add shades and nuances. Remember, we talked about there's elements of gift size. We talked about affinity. We talked about all these different things that you might want to add and give complexity to your segmentations, where you might have a base segmentation that you then get very interesting around. First-time donors plus the fact that they gave to a peer-to-peer campaign. That's one example. So just keep that in mind that we're going to go a little high level with the building of segmentations, but this is a good starting point for you. And we're also going to do it in a way that pretty much anybody can run these from the get-go, and then you can play around with making sure that the criteria is fitting your needs. A very good way to do that is have test records that you know should or should not be actually showing up in the segmentation itself. And we have some examples as we go through this. In fact, we're going to start with one example in the first two queries. The other item to note here is just choosing your output columns. This is especially true because the vast majority of what we're going to be relying on is a export to something like Excel, so I can build a more sophisticated set of copy in something like Microsoft Word. So just keep that in mind, that pretty much selecting the output columns is what you want to merge into your actual letter, into your email is going to be another element where this comes into play. So, first-time donors, pretty straightforward. First donation date, if you remember us using that, greater than equal to, and then one of my favorite types of filters is the custom date choice. So instead of having to rebuild this every single year, you could just say, I want it to be the calendar start year, and it will always be that. It could be months, it could be days, it could be the start of a month. So I want to see all recurring donors that began on this day. In this case, we're just looking for everybody who gave for the first time this year. Bing, there you go. That's it. So that is the start of our criteria. We're going to load this and run the report. Let's go ahead and run the report and notice that all the dates are in 2020. If I filter back and forth, it's all 2020. So this looks pretty good. One of the records that we also are going to kind of pick on here and focus in on is Sophie exclusion. So Sophie exclusion is, just to save us a little time, I'm going to give you a heads up. Sophie exclusion is also a monthly donor. So not only donated for the first time, but has and will be a monthly donor to the organization. So now let's shift into our next segmentation, which is repeat donors. So these are people who gave before 2020 and are coming back again. So now we're going to look at repeat donors. And so this is folks that have given this year, but this is not the first time that they've given. So this is a little bit different than your Libunts, which we're going to get into the next section, otherwise known as last year, but unfortunately not this year. So this is a little bit of a weird one in terms of how to think about it, but notice that donation date is greater or equal to this calendar year, but what we're doing is excluding people who gave their first donation this year. So this means that we've had people who've come back and that they gave again. They gave previously and now they are giving again. So we run the report and we have a bunch of folks in terms of that. And so let's go ahead and actually take a look at Amanda here as an example. We go over to Amanda's donations, and they gave in April, but then they've also given previous years as well. Now we're going to shift into one of my personal favorite segmentations, the non-donors, otherwise known as Libunts or Sibunts. Now, you can get to this report, by the way, with a one-click report, but I want to actually show you that how you could build this on your own if you want to start to get a little bit more nuanced in how you get to it. And notice that last donation date is already output here for us to do a gut check on it being right. So last donation date is less than current calendar year start. Okay, so it's kind of a little bit of the opposite of our first time donor. So we go ahead, load the criteria, run the report, and notice that the last donation date, nothing in the 2020s to be found, going back all the way to 2008. But if we filter by these, the last one was done in December 2019, nothing in 2020. So those get to us. So that gets us to our 2019 donors and before that, but nobody who's actually given this year. So that's a really, really good foundational one, in my opinion. One of the most important ones that I think that you should start with, actually. So this is one where it's actually relatively easy to get to, but what I actually want to use is have this stand in for is when we actually want to run the appeals process itself. So this is one where right now it's recurring donation status equals active. So that's pretty much all you need to do in terms of getting that set. Again, within these, there's actually some really interesting things that you could drill into in terms of amounts, end dates that people have set, etc. But this is the pretty much base part of that segment. Now, for right now, I am excluding from the results anybody who's received the material package equal to 8 segments you need first time donors. Okay, so we're going to get into that in the next section, which is about actually running your appeals process in the CRM. But what I'm actually going to do is delete this, load the criteria, run it, and you'll see what I mean on why I'm pointing this out in just a moment. And so you notice that Sophie exclusion is in here, okay? And remember, she was in our first-time donor segment. So this is a problem because if I'm running 2 different segments, there's a chance that I actually might include other people in multiple segments. Oh no, what am I going to do? We're going to get into that. We're going to get into that in a little bit, but that is actually going to be coming in our next section. I have 4 more segments that I quickly need to show you. So now we got to get into our prospective donors, and this can be a little bit open to interpretation in terms of how you want to put this together. But one way that you can actually engage this is, first and foremost, you are looking for people that do not and have not given a donation. So all donation amount is blank. So now we can get into prospective donors, And, obviously there's a few ways to go about it, but all donation amounts is actually a pretty solid one if you put it as blank. You can also go the date approach as well, but pretty much you're going to be able to get to it once you go all donation amounts. So then what we're going to do is actually search for people that we are doing some prospecting with. So this also depends on if you're utilizing the moves management features of the Neon CRM system. And so if you are tracking your prospects, you are working with somebody, and this is somebody who has not actually crossed the line and given a donation, then this is a really good way to focus in on that type of person. This is also one that it might be interesting to start to leverage your prospecting tools a little bit beyond that. So workflow automation is a good one that you can engage on this, or utilizing our Neon Moves app to actually use artificial intelligence to identify which people you should be going after in particular. So that's a pretty cool tool. So prospective donors, this is just folks that haven't necessarily given, but you've had some sort of interactions with. This also depends on how you're tagging these people in your system. You could be using an individual type, you can be using a custom field. So this one is a little bit less surefire, other than the idea here is it's not that they haven't given to your system. It's not just that they haven't given to you, it's that you're trying to actively get them to give. Ideally, a major gift or a first-time gift from a corporation for sponsorship or something like that. However you're tracking your engagement with them, that's the criteria that you want to drill down into. So this is one of those where you start with something and then you search within the results. Moving into our next section, major donors is another one of these where it's a little bit less surefire on how you should define this. So the 8 segments in your CRM, major donors, if you're just going by transaction amount, it's just all donations greater or equal to $1,000. Now, this is where it's interesting to point out how the system's going to work. First and foremost, all donation amounts mean this is a cumulative amount of donations. If I've been giving you for 10 years and I give $100 a year, I'm in this. But maybe you don't consider me a major donor because I haven't made a one-time gift of $1,000. So it depends on how you define major donor. The general industry benchmark on what a baseline for major donors is going to be is typically $1,000. However, some organizations might look at that and go, I've never even gotten a $1,000 gift. I'd be lucky that anybody's giving me $1,000 total. Then adjust. And then at the same time, I worked for an organization where we routinely got $25,000 gifts. So that was kind of our bottom floor for major donor cultivation. So it really depends. Industry benchmark, $1,000. And you can go through that by individual gifts or cumulative gifts. That is an internal policy decision that you should make. It also, you might be tagging these people as major donors in your system, and it might be VIPs that you know are going to give. You have a planned gift. That's another one that you might want to kind of engage here is how are you thinking about planned or legacy giving in your engagement and segmentations? Put them in the major donor cultivation bin because they might have made a pledge to give to you. And that's another thing that we should be taking account here is also pledges. So maybe you want to create a separate set of segmentations for people who you expect their gift to be coming in at the end of the year. This is another good bucket to do that. Volunteers. Volunteers also depend on whether you are leveraging the built-in volunteer system within Neon CRM, a integration with Volunteer Local, or are just flagging that information in custom fields or individual types after the fact. So really, we're going to go the straightforward route that assumes that you are using the built-in feature for Neon CRM. And so assigned projects is probably your surefire way to get to that. Don't rely on hours or expenses or any of that information to be filled out. If they're assigned to something and it's not blank, that means they're a volunteer. Great. Then use that as your starting point. All donation amounts being not blank, meaning these people are volunteers who donated. Maybe you create two segmentation forks here, volunteers who donated, volunteers who didn't donate, up to you. Pretty interesting ways that you can go about this, but it's just a general segment that however you manage your volunteer data, create a segment around that. You might even be managing your volunteers utterly separate from the CRM itself. Perfectly fine. Then leverage the ways that you're tracking that information and potentially create a segment out of that. And then the final out of the box segmentation is our feedback givers that we are suggesting. So feedback givers is one of the ones where it's kind of a potpourri. And so I honestly put in here just a few of the basic or custom elements that you might have that count as feedback. So you also might want to filter out people who either gave before and haven't given this year, or make this the very last segment that you run to just kind of cover you in all your bases. So it could be something like they have tagged their Twitter page to their constituent account to manage their recurring donations. That's a feature that Neon CRM has, and so that shows a little bit of active affinity. You might have created a survey that you loaded into a custom attribute. We picked the top 3 in terms of their donor satisfaction. Great. Then that's one way that you can think about it. Activities, if you were actively, tracking the fact that you wrote down that they had a phone call or an email and they complained about you, it just means that the subject line that you are tracking contains the word complain. The word containing here, the operator containing, pretty much will just look for anything that has that word in it. So use this for notes too. You can also expand that to notes, and then also kind of the data privacy items. Maybe they've consented to giving you SMS if this is something that you are managing in your CRM. Then that's another way that it's like, great, maybe then I'm going to engage them to a text to give campaign, something of that nature. So this is just a little bit more of a brain teaser to get you thinking about all the different ways that you manage your data in your database and how you track your constituent engagement. This is the one where you can lean in and get creative other than transaction details. This can be also very, very specific around their interests in your mission. If they have filled out a newsletter opt-in for specific information about one of your programs. Stuff like that, especially when you get into custom fields, especially when you use that for tracking affinity and interest and engagement, that gets very, very interesting. Even a combination of activities or notes with this, very, very cool stuff. So the other segmentations just to think about here are, first, the bonus one, peer-to-peer fundraisers, pretty easy in terms of Neon CRM or its integration with our Rallybound platform, is the peer-to-peer campaign is going to be not blank, and you can exclude people who have not given. So this is the example that we gave, is that they might have started a page to raise money on behalf of you, but they themselves have not given to the organization. So interesting, simple way that you can do that. And again, this also can leverage some aspects of our peer-to-peer integration with our Rallybound platform or Neon's built-in peer-to-peer. The other interesting one is, this is a newer one, just to explain the nuance here in terms of creating that segmentation, is if you have utilized the turn the event registration into a donation. This is one where it is not surefire. I do have to say that you should check this one before you actually start to create this segment in terms of the actual people that are in it. But a way that you can get at it is that the system is going to automatically create these fields on an event record for a person, canceled, and the event registration amount equals $0. Those two things being in one group will pretty much get you pretty close there. But then also donation amount equals not blank. If you happen to have a free event and somebody canceled out of the free event, that might not carry you all the way. So adding the search within group donation amount is another way to get at that. So those are the ways that you can create the baseline segments. Let's get into the actual nuances of creating an appeal within the system itself. So we're not going to go too deep here because all the different ways that you can create appeals. You also might just be running reports outside externally, and then you're good to go. But there is one little thing that I want to point out when it comes to appeals and material tracking that is pretty nifty. And so, first-time donors, let's go ahead and actually go ahead and do that. So this is called an external material. You can build this within Neon CRM itself. If I'm going to be upfront, I actually prefer building things externally out of the system, so I have a lot more control over the copy design, alignment with my letterhead, things like that. It is definitely possible to do it within the platform, though. So, first-time donors, go ahead into that segment, and what you do is you could pull it from a report. Let's go ahead and fill in our first-time donors. So it's automatically going to show you, hey, do I want to add any exclusions to this? No, not at the moment. I'm going to go ahead and run this. So you can also add some nuances as you're building your segment. And so go ahead. All right. Sophie Exclusion's in there. She's a first-time donor. Let's add all to material tracking. Now, one of the other interesting things that I've seen organizations do, including an organization that I volunteer for called Capital Roots, is that their executive director actually likes to review the lists beforehand, but she's not working in the CRM. So what they did was that they externally exported that, handed her an Excel spreadsheet, and then they imported the account IDs back into the system. It's that simple. All you have to do is just choose the file, might have a header row, and then you're going to be good to go there. I'm going to go back. Don't need to do that. And then what I'm going to do is go ahead and process these. So, nothing in pending. Everything is now shifted to processing. I can then also, once I'm done with this, mark this complete. But I'm going to leave these in processing for the time being. You can export this information to Excel, CSV, or you're probably just running it from the report itself. And that's it. Okay? This is just to tag it on the record that you're doing something from a direct mail standpoint. Now, why is this important? So if we go back to the other segment, which is our monthly donors, and I pull from the report monthly donors. If you remember, Sophie Exclusion showed up on that, but I didn't save that when I took it out, but now I'm keeping it in. So I'm going to remove anybody with a material tag of another segment. And it's a short report. This is why I'm doing that one. Notice, she is not there. She is not there. If I removed that exclusion, she would then be on there. But now, all these people have had the same thing done to them. And that is a very simple way that even if you are managing your segmentation copy, the actual mail merging outside of the system, that you can ensure within the system itself that you are not double counting people. So that's one simple way that you can do that. Let's talk a little bit about email in terms of building your appeals. So if we go ahead, 8 segments you need, we focused in on the peer-to-peer fundraisers for this one. And pretty much it's going to work the same way, is you add new search. The only thing that this is going to do in default is that you are actually ensuring that the email opt-out is, they've opted out, basically. So that's really the only difference here. The other thing is include all email addresses as opposed to just the primary one. That is always, in some ways, a good idea here, but it's kind of up to your personal organizational preference. The only thing that I want to talk about is the fact that you can schedule and send things in advance here. So if you are hitting your segmentations a few different times, one way that you can also kind of layer in this is you could build the campaign email and then schedule and send it in advance. So we have our previously built peer-to-peer example, doing some very base merging here. We're excited that you've supported your friends in their love of our mission. So notice that the copy leans into the segment a little bit. These are people who supported a peer-to-peer fundraiser. And then you can go ahead and then filter it in terms of your audience. It's always good practice to start to actually bake in very clear segmentation information. And then you can go ahead and send this on a specific time and date. So maybe kind of a few things in advance of Giving Tuesday, a kickoff on Giving Tuesday, some things toward end of year, a few emails in advance of that. So now what I want to do is get into the final few sections of our segmentation walkthrough. And so the first one that gets very interesting is getting into advanced elements of how to use Neon CRM. So the first one that I actually built out, that's a fun one of mine in terms of data management, is I've created a custom field called End of the Year Workflow Segment. And so what this means is that you can go ahead and build a query and automatically fill that everybody in that query gets assigned to this base segment type. And so there's a reason for this. So we have our base 8 segments as an option. If you go over to the global settings, there is a feature called bulk edit or delete accounts. Look at what pops up again. So what I'm going to do is look up material package equals first time donors. Okay, so first time donors. It's going to show me the 35 people that are in this, including Sophie Exclusion. And then what I'm going to do is all accounts, individually confirm everybody. This means that I'm doing something to every single one of these accounts, and I want to edit the data. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop down, you flag that here, and then first-time donors. Okay? What that means is that I'm going to add this field to everybody here. Now, why did I do this? That's because I'm getting into an advanced feature that Neon has called workflows. And so what this is going to show is that I have created a workflow that will automatically enroll everybody into the workflow who meets that account custom field. So I can do that in bulk. It's a simple flag. I can start that at any time. Workflows are pretty cool because you can enroll people at donation entry points, specific dates, so this might work. But I'm doing a pretty advanced one because I have one explicitly designed for this segment. So in fact, I'm going to update it to first-time donors here, and then these are people who have not given to my Giving Tuesday campaign. So this is the other thing, is that you should start to build in your segmentations once you start to run them again to filter out people who've already given during your end of the year appeals process. So the very simple thing is just to start to include all the campaigns that you're driving people to. So if you just have one primary campaign, then that's pretty easy. If you're creating a sub campaign for every single appeal, then just do a in range of and choose all the values that fit that. So that's a very simple way that you can then create the trigger right from here. So I'm going to actually remove that one just for now. And then what you can do is start to create really detailed automatic items. So have their volunteer manager reach out, or maybe have a volunteer manager reach out because they're first-time donors. Maybe they're interested in volunteering. So that's an action. Then you can shift over into if-then branches. So more criteria. So again, I know this is going a little bit fast, but I thought it was pretty cool to start to show how you can think strategically about bringing different pieces of your CRM together to act in concert with each other. Remember, you have the emails that are automatically updating people who've opted out, or the queries themselves for direct mail and email are removing people perhaps who have already donated. So you don't have to do a lot of manual work here. And this is the logical conclusion of that. So pretty nuanced. It probably even deserves its own webinar or training, but thought it would be interesting to showcase that to you. So final item that I want to point out that gets really interesting is the receipting itself. So one thing to keep in mind is that when you were building something like a system email transaction acknowledgement, the things that Neon allows you to do now also include the fact that you can include custom fields. So if I view this email, notice that you can have basic merges for the person's first name, but get into, remember, personalization is key. So if you can even add something that you've built into your queries and your segments that you can refer back to when they actually donate, such as people who gave a high satisfaction score. If you put that right into the receipt, say, yeah, thank you. You did this. This is not the copy that I'd use in that situation, but you get the idea because you can actually use custom fields in your receipts for system emails and letters. There's a lot of other automations that you can do. We have some really cool things when it comes to running an NCO update nightly in your database. That's with our TrueGivers integration. You can also use our CauseVid integration to automatically send out thank you videos. There's a lot of automation when it comes to stewardship and overall appeals that the system has available for you, but these are built-in things that you can do with no coding experience, no overwhelming configuration. You can do this on your own in the next few weeks as you lead up.
All right. Let me get acclimated back here. Okay. There we go. Awesome. Hey, and I wanted to thank everyone for checking out the kind of pre-recorded thing. It was a little experiment. I hope it worked. Looked like it worked for most of you. But there are some extra resources that we've developed in the PDF. I got some great requests for, hey, can you take some screenshots of the actual queries in there? I'm going to work on that. I'm going to put that in here later today, and just make sure that we add this as a follow-up. But we do have a really great end of the year planning guide, a communications course, and in general, really excited. So there's been some requests for workflows training, and there's just so many different things that we could do for Neon One folks. So we got a lot to noodle on. But next webinar, and you should be getting an email soon in your inbox, but also there is a ability to register today. If you check out the next webinar, or the last newsletter rather, this is in there. We're going to be getting some lessons from an amazing report that the Community Foundation of Greater Capital Region and the University of Albany put together on nonprofit board diversity. We have the folks who worked on the research. We have a member from the foundation. We have a consultant who is going to give some practical application for board diversity. So we're really excited for this next one. And overall, I just want to thank everyone for coming today. We are truly better together because of the things that you are giving us. It was really fun to walk through some advanced things, to hear people ask questions. I know that there's some people who aren't using Neon CRM that were interested. Hopefully this is going to help your work. So I know we're over time. The recording is going to go out tomorrow. I'm going to update the slides for us later today. Got some work to do tonight on that to make sure that y'all get it. And I'm going to review some of the things that I may have missed here. And yeah, I really hope that you enjoyed this. And I'm gonna figure out who won the book later on, Jen. But you know, definitely we're all going to be in touch with a lot of more great resources. And so yeah, please let me know. Let me know on LinkedIn. You know, Tim Sarrantonio, give me some ideas on how you think that you're going to use segmentation. You know, tag me, LinkedIn me. Would love to hear from you. I love talking to people how you practically do this type of stuff with your own work. So awesome. And please connect with me. Please connect with us. Follow us at Neon One Tech on Twitter. And thank you so much, folks, for sticking a little bit past 3 o'clock Eastern for this today. And love it. Thank you so much, folks. Thank you so much. All right, we're gonna end it formally today so we can get this recording up as soon as possible for you. And again, thank you so much. Rock your end of the year, folks. Rock it.